We'll work on Wirefall getting audio. We keep doing your thing, and as soon as you pipe in with audio, we'll say hello. But
Killing us.
it is the top of the hour, folks. It is 7 o'clock. It is the first Wednesday of the month. I am Rainmaker, and this is Fire Talks Online. This is a unfortunate day. We're celebrating, or lack of celebrating. We're commiserating a holiday today. This was 1 year to the day, I believe. Right? Nod your head, Wirefall. That we no longer have DHA to attend.
Check.
Eventually. Oh wait, I thought I heard you.
All right. Yeah. For some reason, my Plantronics doesn't want to work. Oh well.
But yeah, this is 1 year to the day that we had our last DHA. But it's coming. So in fact, I actually had my Pfizer vaccine over the weekend. So yay! My pre-existing condition is I am fat. So obesity is one of the pre-existing conditions. So one of the few times I'm happy to say I'm fat.
Yeah. I'm taking up smoking.
Oh, do you have to go to New Jersey for that? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
But forget about it. Um, well, we've got a lot that's happened in the last month, folks. Regular live
In the last
and info.
4 hours.
What's that?
In the last 24 hours.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, InfoSec wise with Canvas, we're going to talk about that. But anyway, we've had some definite InfoSec events happen in the last month. First off, we had, before that, we'll talk about Snowvid 2021. Crazy stuff happened down here in Texas with some sub-zero weather, some crazy ice and snow. I personally was impacted, but not to the point where I had any damages. I had to relocate for a few days with some friends, but did anybody fare worse for wear? Damages? Have to relocate? No?
2 days without water, but we figured that out. So.
Did you have any sort of contingency plan?
Yeah, everybody used to laugh at my 10 cases of emergency water.
Yeah, they're not laughing now, are they?
No.
Well, very good. Yeah, we ended up staying over at a friend's house, just like 2 miles down the road, who had power the entire time. He filled up his water bob, which I think Commander Opsec was pimping out the other day. Basically, it's a gigantic, like 100-gallon water bladder you fill into your bathtub. Basically, due to social media, people panicked in my city, and there was a run on tap water. So everybody was trickling their water, but because of the rumor that they were going to have a boil notice, there was a run on the water supply. It was insanity. But anyway, anybody else have broken pipes, water issues, or anything?
We had my part of town had to boil water for a little bit.
That's no fun.
And as soon as they called me on that, went to the nearest Walmart. Of course, they're all out of water, so had to go to a couple more grocery stores and find just enough for me. It's not like I'm going to be taking out 4 cases or anything. Just 1 case is enough for me. So I was able to manage.
Being a responsible citizen.
And the gas. I have gas stove, so I was able to make hot tea, and keep warm. Although the hot water tank, there was no issues with the hot water tank. Outside faucets, no issues because I bundled them or wrapped them.
Well, if y'all are seeing my stream real quick, I put up on the screen. My parents didn't fare so well due to their water heater. So Rex, you were a smart man by covering yours. My folks who live in Arlington have a what is it? The pump water or the electric water heater up in the attic, and it ruptured and destroyed one of the rooms in the house. So yeah, good times.
Which side ruptured? The hot side or the cold side?
I have no idea. I didn't really ask them a whole lot of questions. I've only been over there once, and they basically showed me one little plastic part that ruptured that caused the whole issue. But that's all I really know at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, I already replaced my a water heater, and at that time, the inline for the cold line was already cracked to the point where it's squirting all kinds of squirting. You know, it didn't rupture where I mean the pressure. I mean, it was squirting like a P line, but for quite a while. So I was able to use the main shut off valve in the street and have that shut off, and before it got really bad for water damage. But and then after that, I just replaced the entire water heater a year ago. But
Oh no, that sucks because those aren't cheap either.
well, yeah, they're not cheap, but I replaced it a year ago, and it lasted through this winter apocalypse. And the plumber was a great guy. He installed it right.
Well, good. I'm calling it Snowvid. You know. But let's see. So it's good to hear that everybody else did okay through the event. Let's see. We did have some interesting stuff. We had the Super Bowl. Honestly, I don't really watch sports, go sports ball, but what I did think was interesting was a day or two later, Oldsmar, Florida, their water treatment plant was one of the first ICS SCADA quote unquote hacks in North America. They'd seen this sort of stuff happen in the Ukraine with negative energy, I think. But this was apparently probably one of the more basic attacks. Turned out to be attribution is pointing at a disgruntled employee. But anybody familiar with this?
Team
Yeah, I
viewer.
saw a news article on it when the story was just breaking, and I thought it was really interesting. That that's like one of the first, like you said, one of the first instances of that happening here, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Whoever was speaking just then, it was TeamViewer on externally accessible ICS and SCADA infrastructure on Windows 7. How many wrong things are regarding that statement I just said? It's quite a bit, right? One, Windows 7 out of date, unpatched software, externally facing ICS, that should never be publicly facing. And they were using TeamViewer with the same password across the board for all their infrastructure. Supposedly, they no longer were using TeamViewer, but it was still installed. And somebody remoted in and turned the sodium nitrate, I don't know, it was lye, over 100 times its the lethal levels. And somebody was watching and corrected it instantaneously. But yeah, this is, I mean, all things considered, this is a fairly low priority, low risk circumstance. It's no big deal. But again, like you said, this is the first time in North America something like this has happened. So anyway, that's something that's notable. All right. The next thing we have is just leaked yesterday. Canvas recently was their exploit kits. Bunch of 1 days. Spectre weaponized exploit was released online, and the malware community is jumping for joy at all the new toys that they have to play with. Any thoughts on that, folks? Has anybody taken a look at it yet? No? Well,
I know there's a drop on.
go ahead.
I just said I saw that there was a drop on Mega.
Yeah, I posted that in our little private chat. The first one that was published was taken down, but it's now been downloaded and propagated enough that it's on the internet for everybody. You can't, once it's up, you can't take it down, right? So with that, the last time something like this happened was Eternal Blue and the subsequent mass malware attacks that we had with WannaCry, and I doubt that you're going to see something wormable or something to the extent of a 0-day dropping. But imagine there will be some damages coming from this. So stay tuned. I'm sure we'll see more about this. And thank you, Jonathan, our resident historian. So take a look at our chat, folks. It's in 2021-03 Fire Talks. We're trying to archive our chats. Uber Kitten, I liked your comment earlier. We'll try to do something about archiving it proper. But anyway, so any other thoughts on the Canvas leak?
I think you're right in the analysis that it won't be nearly like the shadow brokers or any of that, because a lot of people have, or the NSA leaks, because a lot of people already subscribe to Canvas and already have these. So if it could have been weaponized, you know that the adversaries already have it. So
yeah. But it's interesting. I think you're going to find some script kiddies taking advantage of this. Not to the degree of WannaCry, but there will be ramifications. So a lot of people are interested in this. Let's see. Anybody have any talks before we or desire to talk? Any topics y'all like to talk about before we jump into some presentations?
Anyone see?
We also have the Qualys.
Oh yeah, Qualys got popped with ransomware today, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yep. They say none of the production systems or user data is at risk, but evidently some posts show user scans. I don't know if they're valid.
Just goes to show everybody's at risk.
And you think about the thing to me is, they did ransomware, but if you were able to infiltrate, especially their production systems, how many people have the /20 for Qualys whitelisted so they can actually get their server scanned? They're whitelisted. Yeah.
You're thinking of a whole separate supply chain attack going down again? Is that what you're saying?
Well, just to get your system scanned, you would have to whitelist them in your IPS so that you don't shun the scans from Qualys, which come from a /20.
Mm-hmm.
If you've whitelisted that /20 and they're in Qualys,
it's going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Any place that uses Qualys as a scanner could be accessed.
Yeah, good point. That is so basically if they're lucky they only hit, production, but you're absolutely right. If the malware went through /20, yeah, the whole network that's being scanned by Qualys is subsequently at risk. So yeah. Yee. Which on the same note of ransomware, this is actually really cool. I got invited to be part of the ransomware task force. So I'm working with Katie Nichols, I think Ari Schwartz, that's big cyber guy for the federal government. So I'm a little fish in a big pond, or whatever you want to say, little fish in a little pond. But it's cool to be listening into their concepts of ransomware is from a policy perspective. One of the things that they're advocating, Uber Kitten will love this one, is the ability shutting down cryptocurrency. I think we can all agree that I know, right? Because if you think about it, the advent of cryptocurrency is really the spawn of ransomware. If there wasn't an anonymous method of payment outside of federal regulation, there wouldn't be this industry. So I thought that was interesting. And any thoughts on that? Boo Bitcoin?
I did see some report or something talking about how a lot more ransomware actors are getting much more sophisticated and actually exfiltrating data before they encrypt it much more often now.
Well, you know what, you're onto something. I have a surprise for y'all today. That's going to be my talk.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice.
I've got 4 ransomware samples, the variants that I've kind of done a deep dive analysis on, and I'm going to share that with y'all later today, as long as if we have time. I'd like to open the floor to other people before I get into my little spiel. But yes, you're absolutely right. Malware is now doing a kind of a name and shame, where they're exfiltrating data before the encryption, and they are kind of just leaking it and shaming people, in addition to ransoming the data. So it's pretty scary stuff. And I'll only share this. Maize is one of these variants that you're talking about, and this is ransomware as a service. So they're collectively sharing the spoils of war. So it's interesting because you no longer have to be smart enough to create this ransomware. You just have to be evil enough to propagate it. So interesting stuff. Let's see. So we talked about, the other thing that I thought was interesting from a ransomware policy perspective is that there was a lot of talk from cyber insurance from a perspective of insurance. And they're saying that a lot of organizations are putting their eggs in insurance as the insurance basket versus, proactive cybersecurity controls. And that this is a booming industry that really ought to be shut down. In that if ransomware payments through insurance are prohibited, then the potential for large payouts would be decreased. So the thought of prohibiting insurance companies from paying ransom, thoughts on that?
So I'm going to sort of go the other direction on that. I think if you have insurance and you have made a best effort and you can produce enough documentation and evidence that you are following good standards and best practice and stuff, I think the insurance could assist you. If it turns out that you've done absolutely nothing and you're still running your Windows XP machines, then the insurance could just say no.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that was kind of the discussion is your insurance, you have to have some minimum level of competency before you're, subject to payment. I mean, your car has to be inspected and up to date before you can go on the road to be insured. So, I mean, the same should apply to your enterprise, making sure that you've met certain requirements, like you said. So I think that there needs to be minimum viable controls from an insurance perspective. But again, if you're still being if you're still being ransomed, and people are continuing to do that, I don't know. I think that the industry is not going away anytime soon. So that's just my thoughts.
You bring up a good point I had not thought of before with insurance. What about the cost? Right now, insurance is pretty much, I think, based on how big of a target you are from your vertical or just your name brand. But like safe driver discounts, if you go through specific audits, you get cheaper insurance. If you don't go through that, you pay the highest rate insurance.
Yeah,
you still get insurance.
Right. Well, I like your analogy better than mine. But yeah, that's a good point.
So I just threw it up in the chat before we move on to any other topics. I don't know if anyone also saw today. It sort of sneaked out a bit yesterday. 0 days in exchange.
Oh yeah!
Wow. No, I hadn't seen
actively exploited.
Actively being exploited, and chained together as well.
That's
all you need is like a public OWA or something, right?
Yep.
Nice.
What?
So if you're still one of those people that's running Exchange in your environment, get to patching.
Yeah, if you're running Exchange in your environment still, that's you're kind of in legacy land.
I think Swift on Security's been making comments about that in the last day or two. There's very, very few people that should still be running Exchange in their own environment. If you really want to keep with Exchange, go do it hosted. Go with Office 365.
Speaking of running in the cloud, anybody see that Server 2022 dropped, the preview? I haven't had a chance to download.
I did not see that.
Yeah, take a look at my Twitter feed. I think I posted a article, but yeah, Server 2022 preview is recently released for evaluation. I have not taken a look at it, but one of my favorite hackers, Hermit, mentioned that it's very much so cloud-based. So I'm curious to see what features, what the OS looks like, and yeah, checking it out.
Yeah, I think. Did you see whether or not they removed the GUI completely? Because I know that they announced that 2019 would be the last version of Windows Server that would have the desktop GUI. I mean, it still has a GUI to a certain extent, but it's supposed to be a headless operating system at this point.
That's interesting. Go ahead.
It's a server core.
Basically, yeah, server core, yeah, but they were doing away with your non-server core old running start menu desktop experience thing. Like, you won't boot into explorer.exe as your main shell. It's just like your little PowerShell prompt thing that you get with core. That's what they announced with 2019. I haven't looked to see if that's still the same with 2020. Or whatever the version they just announced was 2022. Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's something that I would find fascinating to find out, whether it's just a core version or if they do have a desktop version.
Interesting. And just so you know, Whiskey, your gain is like really blasting. So just so you know.
That's how I do.
Very cool. Well, yeah, so if anybody's taken a look at it yet, that's if you haven't, that's your homework for next month. Take a look at Server 2022 and give us your thoughts on it.
Oh, Whiskey, I know what's going on. So 2022 does have the desktop experience, have the GUI. What they switched is they come out with more annual, semi-annual releases that are server core only and designed for cloud operators. And then the full like long-term service releases, like the 2019, 2016, 2022, they all have the GUI. So it's kind of like a mixed.
Well, I want to see the GUI die. Core only. Let's do it.
You're pretty hardcore, Whiskey.
Oh, and since I'm out of the shower now, I wanted to comment on the policy thing with the ransomware.
Yeah.
Maybe you should suggest to them that if they think that cryptocurrency should be eliminated as a solution, and seeing this emergence of insurance, this is what they maybe should do. Maybe they should be forced to take this insurance, but instead of getting the money for the ransomware, that money that the insurance would pays out to the victims of their fucking ransomware fuck up. Think about how many organizations which your information's been compromised. I think that insurance policy is due to the people who are affected by it, not the corporation.
I could get behind that.
Hack the planet, man.
No. Yeah, because if you did it that way, there's repercussions for the company for their negligence, and the people who are actual victims get some kind of thing. I mean, hell, that might be our pathway to universal basic income. Just all these security breaches pay us out a basic income for us to survive off of.
That's some galaxy brain shit, dude.
Yeah.
Love it.
One thing that I noticed, or that they noted, was that a lot of organizations took out a significant amount of Bitcoin in preparation for them ultimately becoming victimized by ransomware. And with the subsequent surge in cryptocurrency prices, that turned out to actually be a sound investment for now. But yeah, I thought that was kind of ironic. All right, so let's see. We've covered Oldsmar. We've talked Canvas. We've talked about ransomware, Snowvid. Jason, Mr. Kohler, are you here and online?
I am.
You mentioned to me you might have something to share with us. Are you good to go? Or is that something we want to do another time?
It's not exactly a binary thing. I'm good to talk for about 10 minutes, but the slide deck that I made for y'all has vanished. So I've recreated a bit of it in the last 30 minutes.
Well, don't worry about it, man. This is Fire Talks. This is supposed to be short. This is supposed to be kind of off the cuff. It's not meant to ever be polished, so you do your thing, my friend.
Awesome sauce. All right, let's go for it. Alrighty. Suppose I can figure out how to share my screen. Oh, is that the button? This looks like a button. Alright, you let me know if this works, because I don't usually share my screen on...
You are sharing
What do you
tools
call
and
it?
weapons with your fancy logo.
Okay, so this is a talk I submitted for PancakeCon over there last weekend. I'm interested to get y'all's opinions. In short, there's been... We kind of break human history down into various ages, and those ages seem to wrap around the types of materials we have access to at those times. So there's the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. And a lot of people call where we live now the Information Age. And so, given that the defining trait of those previous three ages is in the materials of which we construct our tools and weapons, I think it would be interesting to explore how information is used as a tool and a weapon. And so, yeah, like I said earlier, super rough draft. So, if anyone has anything to contribute, especially on the information part and disinformation, very interested in getting anyone's feedback, either here on the call, or if you want to shoot me a tweet or a DM or an email or whatever. I'm not picky. I'd love to hear from you. So I think it's important to define what a tool is, and so one of the definitions I was able to pull up was it's a device or implement, especially one held in the hand, to carry out a particular function. Now, something I found very interesting is for the longest portion of let's call it civilized human history, a lot of humans thought that they were unique in the fact that we were the only creature on the planet that used tools. And that has, from our point in history, long since been disproven. It's not uncommon to see various types of apes using a stick to fish termites out of a termite mound and eat them with that. Otters are known to have favorite rocks with which they crush the shells of their meals, and they carry those around. And there's some theories that say that those otters even pass those favorite rocks down generations, which I thought was particularly fascinating. And there's other instances of tool usage throughout. You can even go so far as to look at hermit crabs and how they take on a shell as opposed to grow their own.
I've seen stories of octopus doing the same.
Absolutely, yeah. There's YouTubes of octopuses that'll pick up shells and carry them around to protect themselves. And so I think it's very fascinating that this tool usage, which used to be thought of as a defining characteristic of humanity, seems more and more to be a defining characteristic of intelligence, which is shared across multiple species. I don't have a slide for this, but I've heard a story of various, I don't know what the technical biology term is, but groups of primates actually making war on other groups of the same species, similar to how we as humans do. So that's something I'd like to research a little more and talk about with a little more competence. But if anyone's familiar with that area, I'd be interested in hearing. All right. So the Stone Age. Now, an important thing to note is these ages. When I put years and time frames on them, that varies across geography. So there are some regions that moved to certain materials sooner than others, and others that lingered longer than others. But in general, across the planet, the Stone Age is generally considered to be roughly 3.5 million years ago to roughly 2,000 years BCE. Again, depending on where in the geography you are. This is typically defined as rocks that are shaped to be pointy or have a sharp edge. And the process they use to make this is called knapping. And essentially what that is you take a type of rock, there's some examples here, flint is more common, and you chip and break away at it until it kind of shatters and leaves a sharp edge. And I watched some YouTubes on it. It's super labor intensive, takes a lot of work, and they don't hold their form very long, so you have to be continuously making more of these because they would wear out very quickly. I went and looked at the Mohs Hardness. It's a 7, and something that surprised me that it was so high. And I think once we move on to bronze, you'll see why that number surprised me. But after doing a little more research, Mohs Hardness the scale isn't how you would think of hardness. It has more to do with what can scratch the other. So, for example, diamond, which is supposed to have the highest Mohs Hardness of the 10, shatters pretty easily if impacted at the right angle. And the reason that is because the diamond can scratch all the other materials and leave a mark on it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the strongest. It's pretty brittle. And so you'll see here as well, the flint, while it has a hardness scale of 7, is also fairly brittle, and that's why it's able to be manipulated with other stones and other tools, and that's how they were able to make these. Moving on to the Bronze Age, that was roughly 3000 BCE to roughly 300 BCE, and you'll notice there's some overlap there, right? 3000 BCE is further back than the 2000 BCE from the Stone Age, and again, that varies by geography and where the samples are. Bronze is not an element on its own, but it's a mixture of copper, tin, and a couple other metals. It varies. And copper has a melting point of just under 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see that bronze is just a little bit lower, but it also has a range, and that goes back to, it depends on the composition of the materials and how much ratio there was. So you can see as you add more tin, the melting point comes down a little bit. But if you look at the hardness level from the Mohs Hardness scale, you get a decent increase. And again, copper being 2 to 2.5 and bronze being 3, significantly lower than flint, right? And that goes back to the durability. So flint can be shattered, and that's how they were able to manipulate it, whereas the bronze and the copper can be shaped through fire, or copper was even, and some bronze was soft enough that it could be manipulated at room temperature. It's not going to be easy as if it's warm, of course, but that gives you an idea of what you can work with there. And so this led to more durable tools, and even though it took longer to acquire the materials, what little research I've done so far shows taking going out and looking for greenish colored rocks, breaking them down and smelting them to get the copper and the tin out of the rocks, and the amount of rocks you have to haul versus the amount of copper and tin you get out of the rocks, the ratios are abysmally small. So it was a lot of work and a lot of effort to get that out ahead of time. But the extra durability would make them last a lot longer. From there we move on to the Iron Age. And again, you'll notice a decent amount of overlap there. 1200 BCE to 800 current era. Now, iron is different than bronze in the fact that it is its own element. You can find it on the periodic table. And you'll notice there's a much higher melting point there. And that means that they required forges to work that. And so the idea is that the forge, as opposed to just a fire, would contain the heat from the fire and radiate it back into the melting compartment. And you could pair this with bellows and other ways to move air in there. And what that basically does is that the more air that the wood has, it increases the rate of combustion material. And so that releases more energy faster. And so you'll burn through more fuel faster, but you'll achieve higher temperatures. And that's how they're able to work with those. And iron is pretty nifty that you can mix it with carbon. And that could be in the form of ash or charred logs or things of that nature. And you can combine that, and depending on your ratios, you're going to get different types of steel. And and that goes to the range of the hardness there. Iron's hardness is at a 4, which again is higher than the bronze, and almost double that of the copper. But then steel can be, depending on what it's mixed with, what alloys and what that carbon ratio is, you can get it as high as 8. Now, I don't know if you could do that on an old school traditional forge, or if you need modern techniques to do that. That I need to do a little more research on. But you can see here, based on these hardness levels and the durability of these different materials, you can see how a tribe or a village or a civilization would gain the upper hand on their neighbors by having access to a higher grade of material for their tools and weapons. And that brings us on to information. The information age, roughly considered to be 1950-ish to today. Hopefully tomorrow, we'll see how things go. And information is defined as facts that are provided or learned about something or someone. This is a definition I was able to pull quickly. And unfortunately, this is where the quality of my slides ends.
Which, by the way, has been fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Glad you like them. So from here, it's just what I have on memory and whatever y'all care to input. So, information. Its usefulness comes from the ability to interpret and hopefully predict future outcomes. A good friend of mine once told me that the best predictor of future behavior is the past behavior of that individual. And so that information, that data can be collected to try and do some of that predictive analysis. And that's where marketing comes in, where they look at how things, they pull the data of how things happen normally, and they try and model actions and influence to manipulate the outcomes. And when you're looking at that kind of scale, a handful of percentage points makes a big difference when it comes to dollars, when it comes to purchasing power. In 2016, a certain nation state determined that instead of purchasing power, you could possibly convince people to vote one way or the other. And I still need to do a lot of research on that, but I remember when it was going down, there was a lot of really good data analysis pulling from Twitter, some Facebook, and some other things where it's a weird dichotomy where I don't want to say Russia directly affected the election, right? They didn't hack into the machines and change the number of the votes.
But they influenced.
But what they did, exactly, it was more indirect. It was more subtle, right? They subtly presented information or disinformation or highly selected information to certain people to kind of nudge them in the right direction. And a single nudge isn't going to do anything, but when you get nudged repeatedly throughout the day for, the campaign season is like a year and a half for presidential campaigns, it's easy to see how that could change someone. And for me as an individual, looking back at the type of people I hung out with growing up, and therefore the self-selection I did of the information that was presented to me just based on who I hung out with, and how that's changed as I've grown and I went to college and exposed myself to new sources of information, and was forced to make a choice. There's so much conflicting information out there. I had to sit down and reason, what was actually true versus the selected information someone came to show me. And I've seen that play out in multiple ways since then. I saw on Reddit just a couple of weeks ago, there was something or other about, there was a post on Reddit, and it was and being a single male myself, it caught my eye. It's like, single people over 30, what keeps you going? What's your reason for living? And there were a lot of posts about how online dating worked for someone, and there's a lot of posts from a specific provider. and I was sitting there reading, like, thinking how wholesome this is. Like, this is so nice. Look at this wonderful outcome these people have come to. And then a couple of pages down, there was someone posted, this is a guerrilla marketing ad. This is 3 days before Valentine's Day, and it's all about this one particular online dating provider. And I'm like, oh, well, I got played, because if I hadn't seen that, I would never have thought about that. And I was, almost halfway considering going and registering. But and how many it causes me to stop and think, how many other things have I gotten caught up like that? And I consider myself to be reasonably informed and reasonably intelligent. But if I, who consider myself to be reasonably informed and reasonably intelligent, get caught up in something like that, it's really easy for me to see how easy it is for other people to get enough of those nudges often enough that it could change enough people's mind at something as big as an election, where a nation state could indirectly manipulate a nation's election as big as the US. And I find that absolutely mind-boggling. And I do consider that a form of weaponized information and disinformation. And I know there are a ton of other examples, and I had a bunch of slides on them, but I can't remember them all off the top of my head. But knowing my audience here, I know y'all are probably even more informed than I am on these kinds of things, and I would love to solicit examples and references and links and evidence for the rest of my deck for later. So, does anyone else have any other examples that they can think of?
One of the things you might consider is Steve Bannon. He went and weaponized Breitbart. He created it to, what did he say? Get all the gamers and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to look outside. He was an architect, and he did phenomenally well from what it looks like.
Yeah, I'd say focus on QAnon in general, right? Like if you look at most of these campaigns that have been successful, and at least to a Western audience, 4chan is the start for a lot of this. So, like, I started working on a talk 4 years ago that was talking about how the election and the U.S. populace have been, manipulated in various ways. And I never really finished working on it because it's not done playing out really. But
and I don't think it will be. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes like, God, when am I ever going to be able to finish this talk? But the real thing that I could say is, like, growing up on 4chan, being a child of the internet, being able to see where you had on what appears to be just trolling, eventually, like the racist stuff. It used to be where you'd post the most offensive thing you could think of to incite a reaction out of somebody, trolling. And that just kept escalating to a point to where I don't know if everyone just really believed this stuff the whole time and I was just a naive idiot, or it was that plus the fact that people who didn't understand the cultural jokes that were occurring on that board jump in and they just see it at face value and associate that with a safe haven. And the people who are trolling and trying to post the wrong things just to incite some emotion, they're part of that system. They get caught into perpetuating all of that without even really knowing that the things that they're saying as part of this 4chan culture could 10, 15 years later end up being something that's manipulating everything,
I would encourage you to go ahead and give that talk, because I hate to say it, but I don't think this is going to end. It's just going to continue to evolve. And I think, like you mentioned, QAnon, that's a perfect example of that. It's not ending, it's changing. It's evolving, and it's taking on a life of its own.
I think you should first comment in the chat. Your last slide should be the trope, the end? Question mark?
Right. Yeah. build the talk, give it, and then just update it every year.
Yeah, I know. I'm one of those people who just like, I don't know.
Yeah, okay,
I might
that's
do
fair.
it.
I've been thinking about doing this talk since like August and July, so I totally understand.
Well, I was thinking
I have,
go ahead, Whiskey.
I have to like admit to the fact that I like found myself a victim to all of those conspiracy theories things when I was younger. I mean, like growing up on the internet before Alex Jones was a household name, before all of those shootings, man, I was all about this dude. I was all about how Oklahoma City bombing was not what it was depicted from the government. And that's all it took, right? Is that there's some obvious thing where the government hasn't been completely honest with what happened on that day, and it stuck with me and it bugged me because I was personally affected in some kind of way, right?
And there's a bunch of those kinds of examples too beyond the Oklahoma City bombing.
Exactly. And when you have a government which we don't trust for good reasons, that just gives ammo to continue this belief. And I think that from what I was looking at, the real, I think, source of a lot of this comes down to our own government's fault, right? Where the CIA would intentionally do all of these disinformation campaigns so it can immediately be turned around as an example of our government's doing it elsewhere. Why wouldn't they be doing it against us? And then on top of that, all of the UFO conspiracy theories were actually perpetuated by the United States government in an attempt to kind of cause a disinformation campaign and make all of these people crazy. And, that's, if you think about conspiracy theories, it usually starts from the OGs of this. It was UFOs, moon landing's not real, JFK. And that seed of distrust will sit there. And I grew up with a father who is like one of these extreme individuals now, and he had a book called New World Order from Pat Robertson back in the early 90s. And so I was indoctrinated by this concept of conspiracy and not trusting your government. The media is always out to get us, and that the liberals are the worst thing on the planet. This is from the 90s. And then when we see all of this that came about with Obama, basically, that's when the switch flipped, I feel, is that Obama was this accelerator for so many different viewpoints on both sides. And on this conspiracy right-wing side that's always had a distrust of the government, I feel that that Obama divide, all of these insane conspiracies that people came up with for Obama already existed in some kind of way before that. George Bush was Alex Jones's enemy until Obama came in. And the only real shock was that he actually supported Trump. And when you have that kind of conspiracy audience and you're told that there's someone who's not a piece of shit for once, that is really what I think changes a lot of people's minds, and they go into that direction in which they find themselves in a religion at that point. They believe this as inherently true. With no evidence that you throw at them will deter them from this truth that they know deep down inside, because honestly, their whole world would unravel if they had to acknowledge the truth.
You know, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I had also identified the Obama administration as about the same time where this started going nuts. And I like to think that it's not because people are terrible racists.
It was that, dude. It's because he was black.
Okay.
And half black. Just imagine if he wasn't half black, how much worse it would have been, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's just like that perception that people have of like he wasn't even a U.S. citizen, he's from Africa. I mean, that kind of insanity is racism. I mean, honestly, like, like when that plays out over time, like Obama, I think, was part of it, but it was also the time in which we had connectedness. Obama's campaign was so effective because it was an online grassroots campaign that we saw success with, like the Tea Party, and that same campaign with Ron Paul. the Tea Party was an extremely grassroots online movement. And what you see even today with these QAnon people being elected into office, that's due to online grassroots. So I think that it's a combination of a lot of things coming together all at once
Well,
that aided in that.
one thing, Whiskey, that you mentioned with the Obama administration, I thought, as far as using information as a tool, is a tactic that really kind of dates all the way back to the origin of language, with the concepts of bribes and blackmail. You know, using information as a weapon. I think that, you know, where we start using information data from an electronic, from an electronic method, I think 1950 is appropriate. But I do think that the use of information as a weapon dates back to the caveman days, once we could start holding things against each other. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think that another factor that allowed all of this to really amplify is that if you think about Obama, he was a very divisive person for a lot of people. If you lived in rural America, holy shit, if you were an Obama supporter in rural America, it's a nightmare for you, right? And so when you see this societal push in your little local community to be one way or another, you go to online communities to be able to find people who have the same viewpoints as you. I mean, that's how I became who I am today, is because I was able to go on an unfiltered internet and find dissenting viewpoints to challenge all of these things that I just knew as being true and factual, right? That my inductive thought process instead of deductive thought processes. And so with Obama, you see the rise of the algorithm that drives how we consume our content. And when you look at using the internet as a place to go and connect with people who share the same viewpoints as you, that's cool. When you have an algorithm that keeps shoving you that same circle of information over and over again, that's what allowed all of this fringe content to just get into the echo chamber to allow both sides to be as ridiculous as they are today.
So it's interesting. When you were talking there, my first thought was that you had somehow taken the same information that makes some people go off the wall to the fringe, and you use that information as a way to make decisions for yourself and pivot and become, rational, as opposed to what you said, the information your dad was giving you. But then the more I thought about it, it wasn't the information, it was the access to information and you yourself analyzing it and making those decisions. Whereas what we're here getting today more and more often is people that are stuck in that cycle where, like you were saying, the algorithm keeps giving them more of what they want, which is what they want is what's going to prove them correct. So these people are not actually out there seeking data and information, they're seeking validation. And,
exactly.
And the tools we have out there are more than happy to give them that validation in return for advertisement.
Yeah, it really comes down to, if you think about what motivates you to be on Twitter. Is it to dissect news information? Is it to connect with friends? Is it to just get on there and be pissed off with society? For me, it's a little bit of all of that. But for a lot of people, when they go into these communities, they may be just, oh, well, I think that there was something weird about 9/11. Building 7, that shit was weird. Okay, well, that's that little grain of doubt. And that's all you need, because when you get enough people in these echo chambers, they start telling you, oh, you think Building 7 was bad? Have you heard about the Democrats eating little children's adrenaline to live forever and stuff? Like, be like, wow, that's peculiar. Well, there's 100,000 people who have just liked this thing, and so I'm going to use the wisdom of the crowd to believe that this may be more true than that other thing over there that makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I have to reevaluate how I personally operate my life in any kind of way. I think that the disconnect of the physical community around you and the emphasis of a sole digital online algorithmic driven community is what the big problem is here. People just need to have shit to do, I guess.
100% for shit posting.
Oh yeah, I was about to, that's right, Uber Kitten. That's the whole reason I'm on Twitter. I'm there to shit post, and I'm there to consume shit posts.
911 was an inside job, folks. No, it's disinformation like that really is. You're absolutely right. Weaponized to fuel dissent among Americans and people worldwide, and you're absolutely right. This is a time and age where information itself is a tool, something that can be used to build or destroy. I think that is fascinating stuff, Jason. Well done.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Hopefully next time I give this, I'll have the deck finished and some better examples. But that's what Fire Talks is for, right?
Exactly.
Forging the talks.
And folks, if you liked what you saw, you want to continue to extrapolate on Jason's concepts and his presentation, look him up on Twitter. Jason, what's your handle?
It's my name, Jason R. Kohler. I'll drop it in the chat.
Excellent. All right. Well, before we go any further, let's see. Looks like Wirefall just put his entree on the stove, looking good. What are you making for us tonight?
Actually, just prepping. I'm putting a brisket in the brine so that by St. Patty's Day I can have some corned beef and some pastrami.
Very nice.
Oh man, make everyone jealous.
I miss your cooking, man. This has been the worst hit for COVID for me, is not being able to swing by and get some of your food. I guess I did get some of your food during COVID, actually, so it's not so bad.
Yeah, maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah,
and you got mail to pick up, so you'll have to get some more.
Yeah. I literally pulled up outside of his house by the mailbox and rolled down the window, and he placed the food in my car, and I drove off. It was like a drive-through waterfalls.
Well, now that Governor Abbott has removed the restrictions of face masks and everything else, we're 100% open, folks. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that. Any opinions you want to share?
So my opinion, when I looked at the death rate, it's the same as it was during the peak in August. So WTF, why?
Oh, it's easy. Why? It's to deflect from the ERCOT film.
Okay. So I know the answer why, but I was hoping he might have at least some half-brain justification for it.
I just want to say, we're all doomed!
I don't know, the libertarian in me is actually somewhat okay with this, because I like the fact that so many organizations, so many storefronts are like, screw this. We still are maintaining social distancing. We still have a mask mandate in our confines. As long as people have been habitualized by the behavior, I'm okay with the government not telling me what to do. I think that it really boils down to the premises that you walk upon. So, do I think? Go ahead.
Like everything with libertarianism, I've been that way. It's great in concept, but in practice, there needs to be a lot of
it's like socialism
modifications. You know how many frontline workers have been assaulted, and we have a statewide mandate. Now it's going to be the front workers with absolutely no reinforcements anywhere, having to tell people to put on a mask.
Yeah, I agree. That would be my concern too. Is that I've been out and I've seen a lot of people just like. Here's an example. If you go to a club right now, you can go to a club, you can wear a mask, but there's a certain point in which if there's a certain occupancy, this is so funny, but this is true. If the occupancy of the venue was at 10%, you would have 100% mask compliance or they're going to throw you out. You bring it up to 75% the peak that you could have in the venue, and they don't give a damn because like half the people don't have a mask on. And what are you going to do? Keep throwing people out? Yeah, that would
Yes,
normally be
yes.
what you would say. But
Yes.
if you don't care to begin with, and you only just are doing this out of compliance, I think that a lot of those venue owners also just financially are dying, right? Like I've seen some venues just straight up, a lot of places that I love shut up shop, and that's the end of it. So for these people who are trying to keep their companies or their businesses going, I think at a certain point, once they feel like, fire marshal's not going to pop in here, it's all good to go. So for a lot of people, I think they're used to being able to just pretend like, oh, I'm going to wear my mask for 5 minutes and then take it off, and they don't wear it again. I think that's been happening so much that for a lot of people, they don't really see it as being that much of a difference. They see it as a huge inconvenience, you know. Um, I personally think that we should be waiting until there's more vaccinations. You know, this is stupid, but we'll see. I don't know.
Well, on that
I
note, we do have some good news on the vaccination front. You know, Moderna and Pfizer are rolling out great.
And Johnson and Johnson now.
That's exactly what I was going to say next.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Tell us about Johnson and Johnson.
That's all the information I have is that Johnson & Johnson got approved by the FDA, and I don't know anything about rollout timing or anything like that. I just
Isn't
had
that
to
Johnson,
throw it in.
Johnson and Johnson the one-shot deal while everybody else
Yeah,
does?
single dose.
That's correct, but it has, I think, something like a 60 to 70% efficacy rate versus the 90% with Pfizer and Moderna. But it
Did not hear that part.
Yeah, so the value. I mean, the thing is, though, it's still going to decrease the virulence of the, pardon the pun, but the virus. But you know, I still think if you got an opportunity to get a vaccine, you sure as shit better get it. You know, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, if they told me I could get the J&J 60% vaccine tomorrow, I'd take it, and then wait again until I get the Pfizer. So, totally.
That's a good question. Can you get multiple vaccines?
I mean, can you forge multiple IDs?
Well, no, I'm saying, but could you go get the Johnson and Johnson and then go, you know, and get the Moderna 6 weeks later?
So, I did hear something, and I can't speak to the accuracy of this statement, but I did hear something about you could get your first dose of either Pfizer and Moderna and your second of the other.
Really?
And there was a slight. This is what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not. This is just what I've heard. There was a slightly lower efficacy, but it was still functional, from what I'd heard. I'll let me do some Google through while we're chatting, and I'll see what I can find.
There was on the Johnson and Johnson. There was the brouhaha with the Catholic Church as far as dissuading their flocks, if you have a choice, to not get Johnson and Johnson because it's based on fetal stem cells.
Are you kidding?
No.
Wow.
Fetal stem cells, right? What I read from two
more for us.
2 abortions.
Hey, you know what? I completely understand it. They have a pro-life stance, so fuck all these people who might die from it.
Yeah. No, but the way I feel is nobody went and got an abortion so that they could donate fetal stem cells to save all these people. So these things were going to go in the garbage, and we can save people. Isn't that better?
Well, if I would have known it was an option, I could have contributed in some kind of way. I mean, next time we have a pandemic, they need to let us know.
Oh dear.
And that's why the Democrats want this out there, because you know they like eating babies, right?
All right.
Yeah, but if you eat them, you can't make the vaccine out of the stem cells.
Well, you save the bones. It's like a broth, right?
Oh
Is that what
God.
you're doing, Wirefall?
What did this evolve to? Oh my! We're talking about eating
You're
babies.
a fight maker. What are you doing?
Fire Talks Online, where we eat babies. Ah.
So, interestingly
quote you on that.
enough, I am in the 1B category, and I just recently got my first dose of Moderna, and since Snowvid, when the shipments and vaccines and everything stopped, all of a sudden this past week, there's been a lot of shipments suddenly show up, and me and my SO signed up in every county nearby and everything else. And you know who came through? Walmart.
Funny you should mention that. I got my
Wal-
I got my Pfizer at Walmart.
Yeah, there's like 3 Walmarts around here that got vaccines, and they said, "Well, we found you on a waiting list. Would you like to come?" Well, yes. I need to go to DHA, so if I'm going to have nerd immunity, I got to start somewhere.
Nerd immunity. I love it.
Nice.
Yeah, there's I'll have to find it, but my wife is part of some Facebook group that is showing all the availability for the COVID vaccine. So I'll see if I can find that before the end of tonight's call. But yeah, Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, they're all now doing COVID vaccines. And quick question for you. Did you have any sort of side effects from the Moderna?
Heck yeah.
I did not, but my decades of chemical trendy amusement aids have shown that I have a pretty good tolerance for chemicals. My SO had pain in her arm for 3 days.
Wow.
And couldn't sleep on it. So
I've heard of that
yeah.
Moderna arm.
Okay, I found an answer on mixing the Pfizer and Moderna. They are currently under trials to determine how that works. That's what's going on.
Yeah, it wasn't tested. I think not recommended.
Sounds like you're getting feedback from DDIP and the Lonesome Wannabe Cowboy, both saying that they got side effects from the second dose. So,
and that's what I've heard as well.
Yeah, I hear that the body's building up immunity, so the second time you're actually getting some sort of reaction.
Yeah, my brother's a paramedic, and he was able to get the vaccine back in pretty early in December. And that's what he said when he finally got his second Moderna. It was really sore.
Yeah, wife and I both had some side effects, both first shot and second. She had it worse than I did for sure, but first shot was just kind of like, felt tired, little headache, went to bed, fine the next morning. Second shot kind of knocked her out like the flu for a day, and then none of it lasted more than 24 hours. Except the arm, especially for her. Her arm was like sore for a week.
Well,
but, no party now.
Screw the side effects. Get your shots. Get the jabs. They're completely worth it, and you need to do it. So, if you can find a place to do it, if you qualify for it, definitely don't miss that opportunity.
Me and my mom had to drive all the way out to Lubbock just to get the Pfizer.
Yeah, I've heard of people going to Lubbock, Amarillo. Recently, somebody from Israel flew into Amarillo to get their Moderna shot. So
whoa, how'd they pull that off? I thought you had to have. Oh, they probably just had a negative test.
Yeah,
that's probably how they got in. Okay.
Well, let's keep going because we actually have some more content to go through. Can y'all see my screen? I'm throwing up the AIDS virus here.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Uber Kitten was talking about ransomware earlier, and I wanted to...
that virus.
Yep, we're going to talk about some different types of ransomware. I'm going to kind of give some quick rundown of pre-internet ransomware, and then we're going to go into 4 major variants that we're seeing in the wild today. So basically, the very first variant of ransomware was the AIDS virus back in 1989. A guy by the name of Joseph Pop went to the World Health Organization's AIDS conference and handed out 20,000 floppy disks that basically after 90 days encrypted the master boot record, encrypted the files on the C drive, and then you had to send a check to a P.O. box in Panama.
Are you serious? So ransomware is not nearly as new as I thought it was.
No, I mean, like I said, it predated, Windows XP. So
That's
yeah,
insane.
predated the internet. So anyway, um, though the internet really helped proliferation of malware, and so this was the first, not the first, but this was the first era of internet ransomware. So this is like the Reviton virus. Basically, it would throw up an immutable screen on your desktop and lock you out of any sort of activity unless you somehow sent like a green dot or a money order. However, if you booted into safe mode, removed a registry key, you're basically back in business. So it was really easy to remove. But then, like I mentioned earlier, regarding the ransomware task force, this thing called cryptocurrency came about, and the value, the reason that I think cryptocurrency is pretty cool, again, is it's anonymous, secure, instantaneous, decentralized, not regulated by any sort of government or banking system. But at the same time, all of this made it perfect for extortion and subsequent ransomware. So I like to say that, simply put, without the advent of cryptocurrency, ransomware would not be the booming criminal industry that it is today. So yeah.
I would like to add that it's less anonymous and more pseudonymous.
Yes, that's true, unless we're talking about Monero or whatever else. But
Right.
be that Bitcoin is the main cryptocurrency that we're dealing with, it still is the method of payment that we see across the board, at least for ransomware.
Anonymous.
Anonymous, I like that.
Well,
So
it can be anonymous, so it should be downplayed because of the fact that if your OPSEC is on point, you can actually have anonymous Bitcoin transactions.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, and if you think about it from a business perspective, if I did ransomware and I had require you to use Monero or some other kind of Horizon or one of these types of currencies, good luck having someone figure that one out. It's hard enough getting these people to understand how to even install your malware, let alone how to fix it afterwards. So, you got to go onto some Onion site and send things via cryptocurrency. That's already a huge hurdle. Bitcoin being so ubiquitous, it makes it worth taking the operational security risk to use Bitcoin because of the fact that you're going to benefit by people actually being able to pay the ransom.
well said, Whiskey. I like the ubiquity of this cryptocurrency, and so that's why this is the currency of choice here. So, good call. Let's keep going and actually talk about the 4 different types of ransomware we're seeing in the wild today. The first one I want to cover is Maize Ransomware. This is targeting large organizations worldwide across different industries. It's believed that Maize operates via an affiliated network where Maize developers share their proceeds with various groups that deploy Maize in organizational networks. What's more concerning than just the penetration and the exfiltration, I'm sorry, not the encryption of the data, is that they really kind of proliferate through the network. They don't just pop one machine; they pop multiple machines and land and expand through the network. Also, where typical ransomware groups would infect the victim with file encrypting malware, hold the files for ransom, Maize actually gained notoriety for first exfiltrating victims' data and threatening to publish the stolen files unless the ransom was paid. So, some unfortunate victims of Maize include managed service provider Cognizant, the cybersecurity insurance provider Chubb, which I find really ironic, pharmaceutical giant Exupharm, the supplier for Tesla and SpaceX, Visser, and the defense contractor Kim Chuck. So let's see here. So Maize initially used exploit kits and spam campaigns to infect its victims, but later began using known security vulnerabilities to specifically target big name companies. Now, Maize was known to use vulnerable VPNs and remote desktop servers to launch targeted attacks against certain victims' network. Recently, it demanded ransoms in the amount of $6 million from a Georgia-based wire and cable manufacturer and $15 million from one unnamed organization after it encrypted its network. But apparently, the Maize operators actually have some level of a conscience. After COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, some ransomware groups, including Maize, promised not to target hospitals and medical facilities. One example here is the city of Pensacola. For some unstated reason, the threat group showed mercy. In traditional Russian hacker speak, we going to make gift to city of Pensacola. We not publish leaked data, but we publish the list of leaked data and hosts to proof we did it. We really hacked city of Pensacola. So, yeah, they have some level of a conscience. Another thing that's interesting to note about Maize is that on November 1st of 2020, Maize announced that they were shutting down. Security experts weren't just celebrating quite yet because, maybe they chose to, ride off into the sunset. Perhaps their conscience actually finally caught up with them. Or more likely, they just got a lot of heat on them from law enforcement and they decided to shut down and rebrand. No, they just went on Christmas vacation. As of January, Maize is back up and still running their name and shame operations. So, yeah, interesting stuff about Maize Ransomware. Any thoughts on Maize? Anybody been affected by Maize or your organizations?
I think it's nice of them to halt during COVID. That's really solid. I mean, you got to give them some credit for that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that kind of segues into my next one I wanted to talk about. These guys decided to do the exact opposite. Yeah, this is the coronavirus ransomware strain, where they actually not only are targeting medical institutions, but they named their malware after the coronavirus. Now, the ransom piece here isn't particularly groundbreaking. Once the malware is downloaded, it executes, it deletes any sort of backups or shadow copies, renames the hard drive, and then drops the execution or extortion message as seen here above. But what here is this is the interesting piece. The ransomware extortion amount is only between $45 to $60. That's really low compared to most of the variants that we see, which is in the hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars. I personally have two theories about this. One, that the ransomware is low enough that they're targeting consumers in addition to large enterprise organizations. Or two, financial gain through ransom isn't their primary concern. Because what this is also doing is it's the coronavirus part that I haven't mentioned is that it's also deploying password stealers. So like where Maize is doing data exfil, this is exfilling credentials. So you can see just a handful: browser creds, IM creds, cryptocurrency wallets, you name it. So it drops a password stealer called Kpot or Khaleesi. And yeah, it harvests passwords from all sorts of different products. So yeah, so where Maize, they have a conscience, the coronavirus folks don't. Any thoughts? All right. Anybody know what Ekans is? Well, for those of you that don't play Pokemon, it's
talking about that guy.
Pokemon?
Yeah, it's actually not a Pokemon. It's a snake spelled backwards. But
it's a Pokemon.
Yes, it is. It's also not affiliated with any sort of APT. There is because of the snake reference, there is some confusion regarding the actor behind this variant. Ekans is not to be confused with Turla, aka Venomous Bear, aka Snake, the Russian APT. Whilst Ekans is snake spelled backwards, the word snake did not appear in any observable aspect of this malware. Though vendor write-ups and one Bloomberg article point the attribution towards Iranian interests, I still hold this to be true, that this seems to be the work of typical Eastern European criminal syndicates. So, yeah. What's really interesting about this ransomware, though, is that it is targeting ICS, industrial control, and SCADA systems. These industrial control systems are the backbone of manufacturing and production operations, are often antiquated software and systems with known vulnerabilities. And this is a little bit how it works. It focuses and kills certain ICS and SCADA processes, primarily to remove the file locks from sensitive files. That way it can encrypt license keys, data stores, to extend the impact of the ransomware. By impacting these vital files. That's what's really scary about this one, is this is the first ransomware variant that specifically targeted ICS and SCADA. And last but not least, moving on, Here's one of our more notable ransomware variants that I've been researching. This is the Snatch Ransomware. This works just like the others in that it encrypts valuable files, but what makes this notable is how it actually does the encryption. Upon execution, the Snatch ransomware will install itself as a Windows service called Super Backup Man, and it creates a registry that ensures that it will start up when it boots into safe mode. This is where it gets particularly nasty. Once it's rebooted into safe mode, it will delete all the shadow copies, ensuring that there's no backups to restore from. And then after that, it will disable any sort of security software that's installed. Any sort of antivirus or EDR is basically useless at this point because it's in safe mode. And at this point, that's when it starts its encryption process in safe mode. After it does so, it reboots back into normal mode and then shows its ransomware message. And then my favorite ransomware of all time, the Donald Trump ransomware. Not only does he build a wall around your files, he makes you pay for it. So, yay! So I guess that's 5 ransomware variants we covered today. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I got for you on the topic of ransomware. Did I meet your expectations, Uber Kitten?
Very much so. Very
good. Yeah, they were just looking around. I'm like, okay, I hope I met your expectations. So, I think the Maize Ransomware group's probably some of the most fascinating stuff because, yeah, it's not just the malware authors, but this whole ransomware as a service concept. So,
yeah, I'm really just hoping to see, just out of a fascination, to see how it would play out, one of these groups doing malware for activist reasons. So the idea is like, true Robin Hood scenario where, say, you pwn some organization, they're ransomwared, and then the ransom payout is like a dividend paid out to the victims of, the very crime that you committed. So it's like
getting paid, risky.
No, I'm just saying that if you're going to go and do this, like we do find this stuff fascinating because we enjoy to a certain level, from a gore factor, how brutal it gets for organizations. I mean, it is something that we're all fascinated by. This watching a train wreck where we see an organization being brought to its knees from a VBS macro. I mean, this is insane. And so when you think about how it could be used for something that's not just self-serving and terrible, the idea naturally goes to you make these motherfuckers pay. And so, like, if there's some organization like an Enron or whatever, before they all, shred the documents, you shred it for them. And you just go ahead and redistribute that back to the people that they, disenfranchise in some kind of way. I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but I just foresee this type of thing occurring. There's only going to be a certain point where people are like, hey, there's some other use I could use this skill set for. That's
You're like
not
the Pablo
just
Escobar of ransomware, giving back to the people through your ill-gotten gains.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the potential's there, dude. I really do. I think that it's going to happen at some point in the future because I just think that, think about it, there's going to be people who get to a certain level of success with the ransomware game. What do you got left? What? Like, you're just going to be sitting up there at the top. Might as well turn around and, like, give yourself some good PR, because the people start cheering for every single hacktivist group that's ever done something that the public agrees with. At certain points, they have the public on their side. I mean, look at how many people still defend Julian Assange, even though we can agree that not necessarily agree, but we can definitely state that the leaks that he facilitated changed the world. And some would say that was a good deed. Some would say it's terrible. But, people who usually support these people, they stick with them and they still have a following, even though a lot of these people turned out to be pieces of shit, like Kim.com. I used to support him and Julian Assange, all this shit. And now you look at him, it's like, God, wow, you know what? I do stand up for what they did in certain aspects, but the public back these people. They back people like Edward Snowden, and these are usually seen as enemies of the state or enemies of some kind of corporations out there. You see the hacktivists when you have Lulzsec going and fucking up H.P. Gary. We see Phineas Fisher doing what a lot of people would say is noble acts. I think that that's going to turn around and be used in a ransomware way, with people being more and more frustrated with the growing wealth inequality. It's just a matter of time before you see this being weaponized in that kind of like cyber weather underground type, idea. You can see this happening. And so,
very cool.
I don't know, it's just something to think about and maybe prepare for in some kind of way.
Right on. Well, we're going to move along real quick. Go ahead.
I was going to say, by prepare for, do you mean not be dicks? Not screw people over? Be prepared for it, right?
Like real Robin Hood, not the app.
In the words of Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to move on. We've got at least 2 more presentations to do before we call it a night. We've got 30 minutes. So we have the Uber Kitten, dialing in from the West Coast tonight. Mai's going to be talking about what they've been up to regarding OBS and streaming. So they are one of probably the most intelligent people that I know, so I cannot wait to see what you have in store for us, Mai.
Sure. So I'll share my OBS. And this is more specifically around a specific plugin I've been playing with. So right now, if you're looking at the stream or you're looking at my webcam in Discord, same thing. This is a USB webcam, kind of a standard Aki one. But what I got the other day, at least a few months ago, was this little Wyze cam, W-Y-Z-E. And what this is really just a pretty nice camera sensor with Wi-Fi and nothing else. It's got a little magnetic base so that you can put it on things and kind of click it on. And, what a thing I've been looking for quite a while has been just little, like, really cheap cameras, because you look up a lot of IP cameras and they're just like a crappy sensor and then a bunch of like terrible hardware and software, and then they make you pay a ton. When like cameras are so cheap, you can get like Android smartphones with better cameras for cheaper. But these guys have been kind of an exception. So, change my window. Back.
Don't forget the subscription that you have to even store your videos too.
Oh yeah, and I'm doing also all local stuff because I just want to use RTSP. So these little cameras, they actually have a RTSP firmware only for the Wisecam V2, and Wyze doesn't really want to support it because they don't make money off of this stuff, but it works for now. So they've got this custom firmware that I'm showing off the page of, but yeah, these little cameras, fairly cheap, $25, and if you catch them on sale, you can get them for like $20 per, or some down to 2 for $30 if you're lucky. So I picked them up when they went on sale for $20 a few months ago, and I've been playing with them with OBS. And so if you guys, I'm sure if you're not familiar, OBS is kind of the premier like streaming open source tool. People use it a lot for like streaming to Twitch and stuff, but I just use it for the webcam stuff for fun.
It's what we use
so
for
what I've gotten here. Yes, it's what if you saw me a little bit ago, I was on there. So this is what that camera looks like. It's on my desk right here. You can see it. And you'll notice the quality is all right. It's not something you'd want to have on your desk showing off your face. But I want you to look at the latency. and how there's a slight delay, but it's pretty good. And so I've kind of just like stuck these around my apartment. I have quite a few IP cameras now.
You don't have any roommates, do you?
Oh no, this is just for me for fun. You can see my messy apartment. One of the images there is actually frozen. The cat's not there anymore. He's sleeping right here by me. But so the way I've gotten this to work is normally when you add a camera in OBS, and you can see even this one just got stuck for a second, probably because I freaked it out. Uh-oh, is it back? Yeah, when you're playing with these LRTSP cameras, they get a little janky. And so what I'm using for this is a plugin called OBS GStreamer. And so what GStreamer is it's this really interesting audio pipeline where you define like it's really just like it's terribly complicated. You don't want to deal with GStreamer unless you have to, but it does work great for what it does. Whiskey's nodding his head because he has experience with that. But like what you simply do is you just tell it like what are the inputs, what do you want to do to them, and where do you want them to go. And so in OBS you can do that where I tell it to take in, here's the properties for this camera. If you see it, oh, it's not sharing the right screen. Let me reshare that. I'm actually going to share the whole monitor so it gets the pop-up windows. There we go. That's a little easier. So if you're looking at, like, this is the camera properties right here. Yes, the password is on there because this is on a separate network, and who cares? It's some garbage OTSP cam that's only LAN. But really all it does is simply tell GStreamer, hey, go connect to this camera, this device over RTSP, take the input, and dump it out to the OBS. And that's how it gets such low latency, because normally if you use anything, like almost everything has some amount of buffering, because it's designed for taking a buffer, route it to, like, store it up, put it to the frame. This is simply just like, as soon as you get data, send it out. That's what GStreamer is built for. That's what it's so great at. And it has this really interesting pipeline format. You can see this right here. So like, this is a completely constructed image, this test image. And it's literally just a saying, hey, make a video test source. And I put it together down here so you can see what that looks like. You know, it's got like input, video test source, options for it. It says like what kind of format goes into that. It pipes it to the video sync. This is the kind of stuff you just want to find. You just want to Google and find the examples. You don't want to deal with it. That can do all sorts of interesting things. Like if you want to take an MP3 file and like resample it and send it out, or if you want to take an MP3 off of a Samba drive and like pipe that out, or this one's really interesting. Take a text overlay, put subtitles from an SRT file over a movie file, and then send that to something. So it's super powerful and really quite interesting what it can do. And so someone just made like a plugin for that for OBS, and it works on Windows. There's a Windows compiled version of GStreamer. So that's kind of what I'm doing for fun. Like just, you know, when I'm hanging out with friends, I talked to you guys before about how I spend a lot of time in Discord with friends. Like I'll just be literally sitting in my kitchen, like eating dinner on video call, and I'll just have like the camera in the kitchen showing it off, and like, or I'll be doing like the laundry and stuff while my friends are playing video games. Just good ways to stay in touch and talk to each other. I wouldn't like, you can tell it's not the most perfect quality. The USB camera is way better, but that thing's like $80 and this is 20. So it's kind of been for fun. And then that's how you guys were seeing me on the couch earlier, is because I just have a camera over there. Probably creeps people out to come over and see the millions of cameras, but no one's coming over anytime soon. So that's pretty much it, y'all. I'll post the links if you want it.
That's really cool. That's amazing. I recently got one of those Yi super cheap cameras for $20, and then redoing the firmware for RTS is very common with those cheap cameras. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. They're really trying to pimp out their cloud streamings or cloud recording services instead. So it's cool to see people hacking these webcams. So very cool stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's hilarious. I love seeing when other people have to go through the same pains, and it's just awesome. And then I love watching Red Sand because I'll go over next door, and he'll try to do a lot of the same stuff that I'm trying to do. And so seeing how he tries to solve it versus how I solve it together, you come up with all these crazy new ways of creating new problems, really, never solving a solution there. It's just endlessly playing around with OBS. But so you're using the G Streamer. Did you try anything else before, or was this just something you found and just went with that? I was just curious if you had played around with maybe the other firmware for the webcam. I don't know if you saw the. I know you've probably. It's you. You've totally yes, this one. Yes. Have you played with this at all?
I have not, because I was kind of lazy, and I was just like, I don't mind that these cameras do connect to the cloud, but then the RPSP firmware, they don't really do much with that. Like, it's more of just an account state and settings, and like the app can connect to it locally. So I didn't mind that too much, but I could see how some people prefer like the local firmware only.
Yeah.
But this is that firmware, by the way. It's this GitHub repo.
Man, I was really hoping that you would mess with this because I didn't want to have to go through this like blindly. I hate it when, I had to try to do this the first one out of a group of friends. And so I was really excited and hoping that you had dove into this one. So with your latency on the camera, was there anything specific that, like, did you need to maybe use a different resolution, or were you able to just basically use it to its full potential? It's just really optimized.
Yeah, it's pulling the full thing down because here's what those URLs look like. You can see there's no conversion. It literally just takes in the data and pumps it out. And so OBS takes it, I think it's a 1080p and no conversion or anything. It just goes through really fast.
That's awesome. That's sweet. Cool stuff.
Very cool.
So one thing I was going to ask is, have you looked at remotely controlling OBS? Because that's one thing that is a lot of fun, and I know how insane you are. So you're going to have like Discord automations if you just spend 5 minutes looking into this, because it is it's what I was using to remotely control my stream for the George Floyd protest. So when I go from switching scenes so that I could take my stream offline for whatever reason, I would use on I had two phones when I was filming, and one that I would use as my OBS controller, and it was just a web interface that would run locally on my phone in the browser, and it would connect via zero tier back to my laptop running OBS. So if you look into that, you could easily try to tie it in with Discord with webhooks, probably pretty easily.
OBS has their own web app, or their own app to do a lot of that. Have you tried any of that at all?
I don't know. I fucked with everything involving this when I was leading up to those protests, and whatever I put together, I just stuck with because I already invested so much time. I'm just not going to learn something new. I hate it. I have too many other things to learn in my life.
Yeah, take a look at their app. It's actually pretty self-contained. You can
Is it new? Did it come out in the past year?
Yes, within the last year.
Okay, yeah, I'll totally look it out. Now, I run my whole stack on Linux, and that's one of the things that I noticed, that with a lot of the different plugins or different features, if you're running on Mac, oh my God, there's like different nightmares you have to deal with. Windows, it's usually the best experience, but maybe one of the reasons why I went the direction I went was because of Linux. I know that's commonly one of my issues when it comes to OBS, is I have to make decisions based around that.
Makes sense. No, I get it. And preferably open source. I know you, man.
No, it's not a philosophical thing. It's just that I want to be able to have a stack that is like it doesn't cost any money. Honestly, if there was enough free
You're
things
just
out
cheap.
there,
Okay.
yeah.
This thing, Andy?
No, there's an actual OBS Streamlabs mobile app, but that works too.
This one had a subscription. I was like, hell nah.
No, the one that I'm using is it's not a subscription by any means. And yeah, I've used it to switch scenes, and when I'm using my teleprompter setup, that's what I use. But anyway,
That's cool.
We got anything else y'all want to talk about on UberKitten's setup here? All right, I've got 2 recorded videos that I want to share with you real quick. For day job purposes, we're trying to repeat some major breaches that you may have seen in the news in the past and whatnot. Wrong screen. Let's see. There we go. Can you see my screen? Staging the update.
It says paused.
Really?
Yeah, it says you minimize the application. Sit tight.
Oh, yeah. All right. Hold on. This is why we don't do this very often. Stop streaming. Stream. Screen. There we go. I need to stream the screen instead of the app. So, can you see staging the update?
Yep.
All right. So what we're trying to do is replicate the SolarWinds breach as much as we possibly can. Now, there's no way that I could, compromise the supply chain and build some code through a CI/CD pipeline as well as the Russians could. But what we wanted to do is compromise an update process. So we used a program called EvilGrade, piped it through EtherCap, and popped an interpreter shell. And so what you'll see here is in this window here is EvilGrade, where it's different modules for different applications, and you can poison their updates. And so here what we're doing is we're just running EtherCap in this bottom right-hand window, and then we put our Meterpreter listener, or Metasploit listener, up in this window. And so everything is staged and ready to go in just a moment here. We're just setting the options for the particular Notepad++ application. There we go. We're running our listener. EtherCap's running. So now it's just a matter of waiting for the user to do the update. So let's see here. So here's my unsuspecting victim here. They're going to go into their Notepad++ text editor. Just do a file update here. So there you go. Update. At that point, they've spawned a Meterpreter shell. So let's go back to the other machine and you can see what it looks like. So on the back end, this is what it actually is looking like. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see the query in EtherCap, and it spoofs it and sends it, rather than to SourceForge, it's sending it to EvilGrade, which will then push the Meterpreter code. So there we go in the left-hand side. EvilGrade's doing its thing. It's pushing the executable. Notepad++ runs that executable, and then you can see in the top right-hand corner, we have our Meterpreter shell. We were able to successfully connect and dump creds using Mimikatz. So that was one pretty nifty little update. I thought that was cool. What do y'all think about that? Nothing?
Well,
that's one that I wanted to show you.
Sorry,
That
I
was
was
fantastic.
Cool.
Well, the other
we
one
were so struck in awe of the video and the presentation. It's like, wow, that is so awesome.
Well, thank you, Rex. My ego is stroked now. Another one that I wanted to show you all is damn vulnerable web app. If you haven't seen this app, it's really, really handy. One of the things that I wanted to showcase was the Adult Friend Finder breach was a local file inclusion. So I created Sexy Buddy Search instead. And this is probably the dumbest, silliest LFI hack you'll ever see. But basically, the script is pulling from the include.php file. So all we have to do is just go in and change it to Etsy password. And there you go. You have your users right there. I used some smoke and mirrors and chmodded the shadow file. But either way, you can see that we were able to access the hashes as well, just from the web app. So yeah, this just in the Adult Friend Finder breach, though, they were able to access 6 different databases comprising of over 400 million credentials, many of which were quote unquote deleted credentials. So they didn't actually delete you permanently. So those were just 2 really simple little hacks that we wanted to showcase, and so I shared them with you. So that is what I got.
2 things. 2 things. I want to know how you got my pictures. And I think Ashley Madison had the same problem. They didn't actually delete things. They just said they deleted them, and they kept all your information around for eternity.
Not only that, man. They were so incredibly crooked. It was unreal. Like, they were completely lying about the amount of women that were on that website. They had all of these fake
women too. They had a bunch of bots that were communicating with unsuspecting people.
Yeah, and so what they would do is they would so if you created an account and you selected that your gender was male, it would just all these fembots would message you, and you wouldn't be able to read it. You just be like, oh man, all these women are trying to have affairs with me. And so it would then ask you to sign up for premium. You sign up for premium, and it was just a bunch of bots. And this rinse and repeat happened over and over again.
So I would never advocate cheating on your spouse without them knowing, or significant other. And I'm not going to say that I wouldn't feel bad for someone that got cheated out of their money, but when you are a patron of a site dedicated to cheating, you should expect to get cheated.
Right. I mean, it's the hard knock life. I could probably bet that the same thing happens on every single dating platform. I mean, honestly, it's just there's so much bot activity on the Ashley Madison thing that was exposed due to the hack. The class action lawsuit of these guys that were victims that actually occurred, and they won some degree of money out of that whole thing.
I mean, I can't imagine the men that willingly joined up to be part of a class action lawsuit like that.
But that's the thing, is that I love this because there's so many conundrums there. You have the amazing little password analytics you can do on all these deviants to find out the most common passwords with cheaters. What's that even looking like? All of the analysis that was done, where you could see all of these companies, all of these .mil domains, like who signs up for an affair account with your military email, .govs, all of this stuff. You go and look through all of this. You start seeing extortion opportunities. You start looking at all kinds of just insanity that opens up.
There was actually suicides that came from that.
Exactly. Imagine if you were in that breach, there's no way that it affect your life in some kind of way. And so once that happens, your wife leaves you. What are you going to do? You lost everything already. You might as well just sue these people and try to get something back. You have to pay alimony now.
I actually had a female friend of mine reach out to me when the Ashley Madison breach happened because she suspected that her significant other was in that database. I told her I wasn't her personal army, but in my own time, I did find out that he was not on that. So
You know what? It doesn't even matter at that point. If she had to ask,
exactly,
then
the
it
trust
would,
wasn't there to begin with.
yeah, didn't matter. You should have told her. You should have told her that he was on there, and then after she ends it doing him a favor, you didn't tell her.
I'm doing you a favor.
Yeah.
Oh dear. All right. Well, that's all I had for you all today. Any other quick topics of discussion before we call it for the night?
I have one.
Yeah. What's up?
Y'all, Hash is so fucking cool, y'all. He is the coolest dude ever. We already know that, but y'all, you know the smart meter stuff that he came and did a talk at DHA a long time ago, and it's just the most badass stuff. A conversation about this is why I love this community so much. Is because I will never be able to know as much as the collective does, and when it comes to certain things, you just know, oh, I can go to this person and ask this person to look into this because this there's something to this, and someone who's very talented, they need to go in that direction, right? And I had this one little tiny conversation over smart meters with him years ago, and then he comes back with this talk at DHA, and then it says a few things here and there, but then all of a sudden his website that has come out is insanity. It's like he has bought so many meters. He's got this insane Faraday cage setup. He has gone into an insane mad scientist deep end on the smart meter stuff, and what he's actually, what he has uncovered is the ability to detect which meters had the last outage. So now we can actually war drive and find out who had power and who didn't, to find out where Encore decided what was worth letting people have power and who didn't get to have power. If you can war drive around the Dallas Metroplex, you'd be able to start telling a story of how Encore managed this situation in a way that they will never tell anyone, but it's out there right now, waiting for us to just soak up this data. And so he's currently working on tying in GPS records to the smart reader records, which he currently has right now, that you can, he sent me a little video where he's just picking up these smart meters and you can see the last time, and one of them was 2018 that he picked up. So this is very fascinating data, and we could potentially find out where maybe they prioritize certain things like Highland Park,
that's what I was going to say,
over a hospital in Oak Cliff. I mean, that I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying that that's a possibility, and it could also tell a second story of where is the most critical infrastructure that is within the Metroplex from a national security perspective. So these are really cool things that Hash is working on right now. And
radio stations were on all the time.
What?
Radio stations have their own backup power generators. I mean,
I don't know if they have that much.
Right. Yeah. There's certain.
They're probably considered critical infrastructure.
Well, I mean,
I was listening to 101 Classical all that time, all that outage. I was listening to 101 Classical, and 101 Classical did not go down.
That's why you give them your money during the donation drive, dude. That's what we pay for. No, I was sitting here and never had any kind of power at all, outage at all. But I'm 2 buildings away from Dallas City Hall, so that kind of makes sense, right? Yeah. But what about the areas where it doesn't make sense that there was power? What's there that we don't know about? There's certain questions that we could potentially ask, and more importantly, we can actually paint this picture to kind of dispel a bunch of this, because I'm pretty certain that a lot of people have this idea that wealthier areas weren't as affected as non-wealthier areas. I know that's going to be true in some contexts where
if someone's living in an area that has low income housing or something, they're most likely further away from critical infrastructure. That's just the way it ends up being a lot of the times, right? So a lot of these things we can start to uncover and really get a true insight into what happened here. And I think that's awesome because there's not many places where you could actually, have such a relevant use of someone's garage time. I mean, he's actually been preparing for this moment for years.
I've been waiting for this moment my entire life.
And now it's just like, this moment has occurred where he was recording data while the power was out so that he could learn as much as possible during the outage. I mean, this is the most badass shit. And so he's got his website up and a video that's kind of explaining all that he's going to be doing. And he's working on this whole video series where he's going to walk everyone through how to do the exact same things he's been doing. And
do you have a link to that?
Yeah, I'll pull it up and post it. I posted it on Twitter a few weeks ago, but I'll dig it up. But yeah, look forward to seeing that. I reached out to a couple of media contacts to try to work with actually making use of the data that would be collected. So once all of these things are kind of coordinated, I'm not sure how much it would actually take to have potential war driving competition around this, but it might be fun to see if we could get a couple of people in the community involved in going out and gathering some of this data.
Yeah.
But he's cracking away at it at his own pace. But I was just kind of letting everyone know that's something that's in the works. So it's pretty cool stuff that I don't think a lot of people recognized when he first posted, that he's got this amazing wealth of knowledge that is just out there.
I remember his DHA talk. Gosh, it's well over a year now. But I remember him talking about being able to remotely read, smart meters and digesting their protocol and kind of breaking that out until, didn't he find the manual online after all his reverse engineering?
Yeah, what it was, oh man, it was such a funny moment where he was talking about how this issue had been plaguing him, and he was just, none of this is making sense to him, and he's frustrated, and his wife says, well, have you tried Googling it? And he just scoffs at her like, are you kidding me? Googling this? Do you understand that you can't Google the things that I do? And so then he's just like, a little bit later, he just sits there and Googles it, and come to find out, there was in the Northeast some city paid for a pen test of their smart meters, so they had insider information to know how to pen test this.
That's what it was.
And he found a PDF that explained, and this was the key, and this is something for everyone to remember because this is the teachable moment for him, was that he was thinking of 8 bits is what he was looking for, and he should be looking for 10 bits because you had the on and off at the end. So think of a serial connection, how the way that you transfer data in that way, that he had to compensate for that with the wireless. So anyways, long story short, that was the last that all of us really heard from him about this topic, but he has just come back with, he sent me this video and I was like, oh my God, dude, you just blew me away.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely keep in touch with Hash and let us know where what the next advent of his work kind of comes, what comes to fruition here. But that takes us up to the top of the hour, folks. This was probably, I don't know about y'all, but probably one of our better FTOs. So with that said, we're going to call it for the night. Stay tuned till next month and the next month and the next month until we actually call this and we start meeting again for DHA, and then we'll move to a different date and time. So with that, thank you everybody for dialing in. We couldn't make this this meetup without you and your participation. So again, thank you all, and see you next month. Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Rainmaker.
Thank you.
Bye. Love y'all.